Hello from the San Francisco Bay Area. I am your Truth from the Trenches event series host, Sarah Scudder. I've spent my career in the print and marketing procurement space. I run RSN, a print sourcing tool software company. Our tool provides an innovative and painless technology-driven way for customers to buy high-quality print and packaging for less. Multiple research studies have shown that printed marketing communication appeals to consumers and business buyers in ways that digital communications cannot duplicate. Even more studies show that companies have greater success when they use an integrated omni-channel approach to marketing. So you might think that most companies routinely include a print component in their omni-channel marketing programs, but that has not been the case. Until recently, it was cumbersome to incorporate print and omni-channel marketing programs. That's no longer true, but companies still haven't added print to their omni-channel marketing toolkit. Today, I'm joined by John Follett, co-founder and chief customer success officer at Demand Metric Research Corporation, and Nick Runyon, chief marketing officer at PFL. Nick and John will be sharing the major findings from their latest survey on the state of multi-channel marketing, and they'll explain why print should be a part of your omni-channel marketing programs. And John and Nick, when I was reading through your report, it makes me think about the direct mail that I've been receiving. And I would say I've definitely seen an uptick in direct mail that comes to our mailbox in the last, I would say, 6 to 8 months. So I definitely see that COVID has had an impact on the way companies are leveraging print. And I can say from personal experience, I've definitely seen an increase in direct mail that's coming to my house, and more importantly, personalized, customized direct mail, where companies are taking data that they know about me and incorporating that into their print. So before we kick off, I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. And for those of you that are joining us live at the bottom, we do have a chat function. So if you have any questions or comments that you want to ask, feel free to put those in the bottom. We also have a Q&A as well. So feel free, if you have any questions, to put those in there as well. So Nick, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself today.
Well, as you said, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at PFL, and we are a tactile marketing automation company. So we bring direct mail, our software brings direct mail into the digital channels of some of the biggest brands in the world. So we integrate the physical and the digital, and have seen huge success, and really interested in I love this report every year that we do it, because it just sheds a light on this whole landscape, and excited to talk about it today.
Thank you very much for being here. And John, if you could introduce yourself.
Of course, yeah. Thanks so much for having me today, Sarah. Nick, it's good to see your face again. It's been a while since we last had a chance to do a webinar together. Demand Metric, we're a technology-enabled service provider and an analyst firm. And we've spent the last 15 years researching revenue operations and go-to-market strategy. And we empower our customers through practical content. We provide coaching, training, and a go-to-market operations platform. So one of the first steps in doing research is to find a great brand to partner with. And it must have been 3 years ago, we connected with the team over at PFL and decided to look at not just the state of multi-channel, but also just as the emergence of direct mail, really kind of started taking shape, especially in B2B, we wanted to explore that a little bit more closely. So we've had the pleasure of doing this research study for 2 years now. Hopefully there will be a third. And today, just really excited to kind of share some of these results and best practices with everyone.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here, John. So before we dive into the report, which is what we're going to spend most of our time talking about today, Nick, I wanted to start with you and talk about why you think that it is that so many people think that print is dead and ineffective, And if you have any examples you could share, well, where maybe print has not been effective and, maybe digital has made more sense. Because I know, being that I run a company in the print space, I get people all the time sending me notes or commenting on social. Why are you in the print industry? Nobody prints anymore. So I'd like to get your perspective on why you think that is, and maybe some examples when print is not the most effective strategy.
I've been in marketing for going on 18 years now, and marketing is digital. I mean, that's the world that we live in. And I got my start by talking my way into a marketing director role when my boss vacated that position. And my whole argument was, this space is changing so quickly. You, CEO, can hire me because all we have to do is learn faster than the competition, apply it, measure it, and then just cycle that, and then we'll win. And I could see he was thinking about it. And then I said, and then plus, you don't have to pay me as much because I don't have the experience. And I got that job, and I kept it for 6 years, and that led to like greater opportunities along the way. I came into PFL as the CMO in late 2019 because I was amazed by how the integration of the physical and the digital have such a large impact. And what we'll talk about, I'm sure, today is that actually every channel begins to rise once you orchestrate these channels well. But I think the reason why people think print is dead, to your original question, is because we've been doing marketing through digital channels. We've been so really, I'm trying to think of a good word. I'm thinking of pampered. I'm thinking of reliant. But like, I rely on instant feedback. I can put money into Google Ads, for example. I can see conversion rates, click-through rates, time on site. I can measure everything so easily, all the way down to revenue. And we've become very reliant on that. That's not been possible in the past with print. We're going to talk about how you can get that revenue attribution today. But I think that's why. So people have just moved away from it because it's hard and it's siloed. And I think that those experiences or that thinking has probably been reinforced by some of the experiences that we as marketers have that tend to stand out. I think human nature is you think about the times that you get hit and it hurts, and that stands out as the norm. So if we've run, digital campaigns that weren't, or I'm sorry, print campaigns that weren't tracked correctly, or maybe our segmentation was incorrect, or we ran some kind of print thing locally and it didn't return the results that we expected, we just write it off. I don't think that's true. I don't think that it has to be true. And what I really love about this conversation today is that the data shows us that that is not the case. With over 600 marketers surveyed, very few of which were PFL customers, by the way. I always like to throw that in. But that's not the case. I think print has a place in the omni-channel strategy, and people should be looking at it. And we're getting a lot of inbound interest in that these days, actually.
Mm-hmm. John, why do you think print can be or is effective in multi-channel marketing?
I mean, yeah, just to kind of build off of what Nick's kind of shared there, I think, go back to 2005, there was this time period where marketers were kind of chasing after the shiny objects, right? Like the emergence of marketing automation was happening. People were standing up those systems. We're playing around with digital ads, social media ads. And what happened was just there was so much clutter. There was just tons of clutter. Even email today, really popular channel, as we'll see, but I get 300 emails every day. So that brings us kind of to today. And in this pandemic world that we live in, how do you cut through that clutter? And direct mail just has this unique ability to do that. And not only that, but actually provide people with like Nick said, and this is something that I learned from him actually, a real experience, that's very different from other channels that people are using, that marketers are using. And there's something to be said just about the excitement that receiving a piece of mail brings to people today. I look at a few years ago, I used to go to my mailbox and all I'd pick up were bills and flyers. And now, because of brands like Amazon and just, ordering stuff online, it's exciting to go check the mail. And so I think marketers have started to kind of incorporate that into their multi-channel strategy. And as we're going to see from the data, those that are doing that are delivering a better experience to both customers and prospects alike. So it's not like direct mail disappeared. It's almost been reinvented. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for marketers who leverage it properly. And that's a key piece of the puzzle that we're going to get into.
And John, one of the things that I think is really interesting is the resurgence of the catalog. So I'm a millennial. I'm not sure if both of you are millennials as well, but I think people think, oh, millennials, they hate print. They do everything online. Harvard did a study last year in February of 2020 with a luxury retailer in the jewelry space. And they had the brand launch a marketing campaign that was digital only. Then they had the company launch the exact same campaign again in conjunction with a catalog. And the results showed that there was a significant increase in sales with the digital and print campaign. And when I say print, I mean a catalog, which is considered a direct mail piece. And the increase was in two ways. One, obtaining new customers that hadn't purchased from the brand before. But secondly, the order size increased. So where I may have bought a $500 watch, I now bought a $750 watch. So if either of you want a copy of that study, let me know. But I think it's really interesting, and I've used it and posted it on social media before. But again, that just goes back to Harvard Business Review spent the time and resources to actually conduct a campaign talking about the impact of direct mail. Their results also showed, which what we're going to talk about today is similar to your report. If done correctly, it can really increase sales and drive traffic for brands.
Very cool. Yeah, please share a copy of that report. That just took me back to, I'm at the tail end of the millennial generation. So immediately I thought of the Sears catalog, which I used to go through picking out presents and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd love to see that and look a little bit more closely at their results. So please.
And two of the brands, which I think is really interesting that are using the catalog is Amazon and Wayfair. And again, those are brands that when I think of those companies, I think of digital. I don't think of print, but they have found that print has been so impactful that they're incorporating catalog and direct mail into their strategy. I actually posted about this on LinkedIn last. Wayfair actually created a senior level marketing position for their catalog strategy and execution. So it's so important that they're creating a 6-figure job for somebody to come on and manage that for the team. So really, really exciting things to see. So Nick, can you give us a little bit of background about the study? Those who are watching and joining live may not have been familiar with the study or had a chance to read it yet. So what was the inspiration? How did you conduct your research? Just give us some overview.
It's so easy to get into this place where you have tunnel vision, echo chambers. I don't know. There's all kinds of things that we could talk about. But what we began to see and what we thought we were seeing was that, especially among some of the biggest brands that we were serving, once direct mail or dimensional mail, and we can talk about, the whole spectrum there. But once that is integrated, with your digital campaigns, our customers were reporting to us that they saw a lift in the effectiveness of all channels. So, for example, when I put maybe a branded kit into somebody's hands of a prospect, the engagement across that, not only that prospect's individual engagement, but across that account begins to rise through all the digital channels as well. Email open rates start to go up. And we thought, is this just an anomaly, or is this something that can maybe be more measurable? And that's where John and his team brought the expertise around the measurement, really putting some of this data together for us to help first our own teams understand, well, what's actually happening here. It's been an incredible source of insight, data, really a revelation for some of our team, but also for our customers. And you asked before, or you mentioned earlier, John, like maybe we'll do it again. Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite cadences of the year, is just gathering this data and understanding what people are seeing. And I think especially this year, because one of the most interesting, and sorry if I'm jumping ahead here, but one of the most interesting things that came out in the report last year, where the survey was really done kind of pre-COVID, was events and direct mail had the highest response rates among marketers surveyed as the most effective channels. Events are totally different this year. So we absolutely need to go back and say, okay, now what's happening? What are you seeing today? So that's to come. I'm really excited to see what that leads us to.
So Nick, how many people did you survey? And tell us a little bit about the people that responded and what industries they are in.
Yeah, so it was nearly 600 marketers across a variety of industries. I mentioned before, very few of those were PFL customers, which I think is really important, because a lot of times some of these surveys are, we see stuff like this come out in the industry, and it's
a little slanted.
It's slanted. I was going to say self-serving, but this is serving our own purposes, obviously. I mean, it's an incredible resource for us, but very few were our own customers, which I think is important. And actually, whenever we've presented this, it's not uncommon for people to say, yeah, but what's your sample size? And, dig into all the details. So the methodology of the survey was really conducted by John and his team, and it's an incredibly valuable resource to be partnered with a team like that can help us do this well and make sure that the results are not only statistically relevant but accurate, and have a good spread across demographics.
Okay, thank you. So John, there's a few different segments of the report. So we've got 4 parts, and then at the end there's kind of the action item, which we'll talk about on what people can actually do to leverage omni-channel marketing at their companies. So let's start with part 1. Part 1
Sure.
of the report is the multi-channel campaign mix. So why should we care? What does this mean, right? For those who haven't read the report, and then what are some of the key takeaways from this part of the report that marketers should really kind of highlight and take notes on?
Yeah, I think probably the best way just to share is for me to flip on my screen here. Oh, host disabled, participant sharing. I might not be able to do that.
Hold on.
Oh, yes. Looks like I'm good to go now. Excellent. Okay. So let me just find my Adobe. And you can see me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, awesome. So the first part, Sarah, just to answer your question there, was just to really take an inventory of the different channels that marketers are using. So we just asked, which channels are you using? And it was a kind of a select all pick list. I think it was probably not a surprise to anyone around here that email was the top channel that marketers are using. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who isn't using email in their marketing efforts. Social as well, and then events. And to Nick's point, with events, interesting, now that this was such a popular part of the multi-channel mix, and now we've all been forced to do things, like use Zoom for webinars and try and engage people in different ways. But this was just really to serve as a baseline. And one of the kind of surprises for me, because I, engage with our customers daily, they tell, we talk through all different types of challenges that they're facing. But I've been hearing anecdotally that a lot of marketers were using direct mail as part of the campaign mix. I was surprised to see that almost 50% of our sample was using direct mail. So that was really eye-opening. And then also just in kind of the anecdotal conversations that I have had, we've been hearing that those marketers have had some great results with direct mail. And that wasn't necessarily a tactic that we had employed here at Demand Metric quite yet. So for that reason, we've since decided to do some experimentation with that. And I can maybe share that after we kind of get through the first part of this. But so we just first took a kind of the pulse and really tried to understand which channels marketers were using. But one of the things that we wanted to hone in on was, what is the right mix when you're talking multi-channel? Or is it, if you're firing up a multi-channel campaign, Should you be using 2 channels? Should you be using 6? Should you be using 10? So we found that the average was about 3 to 4. Half of our study participants were using 3 to 4 channels, but that didn't really tell us a lot. So we added another dimension to this, which was the effectiveness of the campaigns that they were running. And so what we ended up finding, and this was one of the key takeaways for me, was that in 2020, the marketers who were using between 4 and 6 channels reported the highest response rates overall to their campaigns. So that started telling us something, and you'll see there was a shift from 2019. In 2019, marketers were using a lot more channels. They were reporting the highest response rates at kind of the 7 or more benchmark, versus in 2020, it seemed like marketers were paring down their channels, and still kind of that group was reporting the highest response rates overall. So really what we are kind of thinking, and our kind of position on this, is that it's not about using tons of channels. In fact, I discourage any marketer from just, starting channels if there wasn't intent or strategy behind it, but it's all about picking the right channels for their target audience and really then working to optimize those channels effectively. So let's just go. I think there's one more slide here that I wanted to show in this. The other thing was we wanted to figure out, what set those marketers who are finding success with their multi-channel campaigns apart from the rest of the pack. And the top answer was data accuracy. And I think that goes hand in hand with systems and infrastructure and having the technology in place to really leverage that data effectively. And so that was the first one. Obviously, understanding audience needs, I think that's just a general best practice in marketing overall. But the other one that jumped out was this idea of design and branding of those delivered messages. And I think there are a few different schools of thought, but sometimes there isn't really enough thought put into the coordination of design and branding behind an omni-channel or multi-channel campaign. And that can really impact your results, right? If you've got something that comes out that looks entirely different, like it could be from a different company, that's going to impact the return on your investment, certainly, and also your campaign results. So those were the 3 that kind of jumped out at me. But overall, I think that the key takeaway here is just the number of channels in use, right? We found 4 to 6 was really the sweet spot for getting the most out of your multi-channel efforts. And I think that really opened the door to other layers of analysis that we did a bit later in the study.
And I think your comment on data is really important. So we work with a lot of marketing procurement professionals at RSN. So these are individuals that sit on a procurement and marketing team. These are often people purchasing and setting up strategy for print. And data is probably the most important thing that we hear companies saying now. We need to get and have good data so we can make better buying decisions and buy and implement technology and all the things that they need to do to help the marketing leaders be successful. So I think data is going to continue to be a priority for procurement, sourcing, and marketing teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a foundational element to any campaign. If you're going to start off on the right foot, you need to make sure that you've got the right people, all their information to really make those informed decisions in terms of your strategy. So
I'm on Clubhouse, Nick or John. I'm not sure if you've jumped in yet, but it's kind of addictive. And so I host a marketing procurement room every Tuesday morning with Tina Fedgent. She's a marketing procurement leader in the UK. And today we actually talked about direct mail since we were having this interview. And one of the guys on our stage talked about how he loves Aston Martin and he drives an Aston Martin and he wants another one. And so he got a campaign from Aston Martin, which had a direct mail component. And he said they must have really good data because what he got in the mail was specifically targeted at him and it was spot on. And he said he's actually, thinking about test driving now and potentially making another purchase. And I think print was a factor in that because they had such good data and then used that as part of their omni-channel strategy.
That's such a great example. And on one of those slides, John, where you talked about the top 3 of data accuracy, audience needs, and design, I actually think that things like the mix of online and offline tactics is artificially low because people haven't yet figured out what some of the big brands know. Like Aston Martin understands right person, place, time, how to integrate that with their digital campaigns and target that very precisely. That's really difficult to do with list segmentation. It's a lot of manual process, but what we see across the MarTech stack is that a lot of these brands are now adding capabilities to really pull, near real time data for unit of one production, highly personalized, orchestrated with whatever digital experience that gentleman was also receiving. And I think in years to come, my prediction would be that we see that increase because that seems to be a major indicator, just anecdotally still, like the Clubhouse example, but that seems to be a big signal that we're seeing that leads to purchase intent and, ROI.
And I think it's important to note that it's really essential to think about the price point of what you're selling. So the Aston Martin example is obviously a high ticket item, right? If I'm a pizzeria here in Danville, California, I'm not going to go out and spend $50 a customer to create this unique direct mail piece. I'm going to do blanket direct mail and create a coupon and send it out to every homeowner or every resident within a certain mile radius of my location. So I think that's a really important thing when you're looking at which 4 to 6 channels you're going to use and if and how you're going to incorporate print. You need to understand the price point of the item and the type of consumer that you're going after.
That's such a good point.
Jeep Cherokee I posted this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. I've kind of been on a direct mail kick lately. Maybe it's because of our interview in this report, but Jeep Cherokee also did a really cool direct mail campaign a couple of years ago. And I posted a picture of what they actually did. Leo Burnett was the agency that actually designed it. And again, that's a high ticket item. You're looking at a $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 purchase. And they used multiple channels. Print was one of them, and it was definitely a high-end item that they sent to the potential customers or repeat customers, but they showed a 76% effectiveness rate from the direct mail campaign. And when I say effectiveness, these are people that went into the dealership and actually test drove, and then several of them actually placed pre-orders. And that was because they studied the market, right? They figured out which channels made most sense for their customer, and they felt print and direct mail was an important part of that. And they spent, resources to design and create something that was really cool and had customization. So automotive, I think higher ticket, cars and vehicles, I think is prime for something like this.
Yeah. Actually, Sarah, you're going to love this because, one of the things I love about my job is I get to talk to a lot of marketers. And last year we were doing an event and I had an opportunity to interview one of PFL's customers, a company called Who Knew It. They offer a predictive analytics solution. And I think this kind of speaks just to the price range of dimensional mail, but the importance of leveraging data. So they knew what their target audience was, and they were using an account-based marketing approach. But because they've got this predictive platform, they actually sent out fortune cookies to their decision makers that had little predictive insights with a handwritten note that was highly personalized. But they leveraged data to know exactly who they were going out after. And the VP of marketing over there said that they had generated, just from this one campaign, $12 million in pipeline. And it was, thinking kind of outside of the box, but doing something using data that, that also showed their brand, but also that they had a fun, they have a fun, playful brand as well, can certainly yield some pretty amazing results. So I think it's true. There's a spectrum. It depends on, what you're selling, but it shouldn't really hold anyone back from just experimenting and giving it a shot, So.
And I've seen the fortune cookie example before, some other camp brands, and that's not overly expensive, right? Nope. So that's a great example of something that can be highly impactful that maybe is not $100 or $150 promotion like a Aston Martin or the Jeep Cherokee example. So that's a really good example that you still can use data and personalization and not cost, not have to take a significant budget to do that.
Yeah.
I think your point about the price point of what you're selling is really key. We've talked about this, so we can move on. But I just wanted to say, all of these examples are about the results and the business impact that's trying to be driven. It's not about what goes in the mail piece or what goes in the box. Now, the content, the personalization, I think is more key than whatever item happens to be included. To your earlier point, the data and really the specificity around the audience that you're trying to engage with really should inform that marketing messaging. And then any items that are included in dimensional mail, whether they're branded or not, need to support that message for like an overall experience and something that really drives impact and value for the customer or for the prospect, but also for your business.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so Nick, let's move on to part 2 of the report. This was talking about target audiences and channels. So tell us a little bit about what this means, why we should care, and any of the key takeaways from this segment.
Yeah, so, this section of the report talks about which audiences marketers are trying to reach, and the channels that do the best job of reaching them. So a lot of great data that I think we can reference out of here. Not surprisingly, C-suite executives are the top, and I think that, came in at 55%, are trying to reach an executive. If we think that digital clutter is, keeping people distracted, generally speaking, I'd say it's even more so at the executive level. Spam filters are more rigorous. Emails are just flat out ignored. Not at this job, but in my previous role, I had an assistant that would give me 10 emails a day. And then anything that I needed to know was on a one-pager at the end of the day. I didn't even check my email as an executive at that company. So direct mail, I think, has an incredible ability to gain some mind share, gain some access with the C-suite in particular. If a box arrives at the office or at my home or, a FedEx envelope and it's got my name on it, nobody screens that. It comes straight to me. So I think we can all relate with that example. Some really interesting audience metrics here out of this section of the report, though.
So other than the C-suite, which you mentioned is what most companies are targeting, I also thought it was interesting that second was actually the end user. And that was actually pretty close number-wise in the second bucket of people. And I think that actually kind of goes back to a shift I'm seeing in companies in general, where things are now being pushed back to the business units, and business units are being given the autonomy to manage budgets and drive change themselves. So I actually think we're going to see more and more decisions happen from the end user, and I could actually see that number grow in your report next year and potentially even surpass the C-suite at some point.
It'll be interesting. We're watching this very closely. I think you're right, especially around, we have a lot of customers that are looking to use direct mail as part of their multi-channel campaigns to influence business metrics like product adoption, retention, account retention. And so the end user is a very key target audience. It came in at 49%. So you're right. It was a number 2 on that list. Regarding the budgets, I think this is where the ABM conversation I think is really interesting and kind of constantly evolving. So you've got these buying committees that we're beginning to see in our own marketing process. We follow an ABM strategy, and certainly we're seeing that type of buying committee engagement around renewals of our own software product. And a lot of our customers are experiencing that as well. So that's an interesting combination of these two examples, because you've got end user and executive, maybe director level decision making that needs to happen in concert with one another. So how do you get those people talking? Like direct mail and as part of a multi-channel campaign has a way to do that. We had a customer that would send direct mail to both the executive and the end user, and then the call to action was for them to connect and kind of connect the dots in their two mail pieces, so it was like a part A and a part B, and you had to get together and talk about it in order to get kind of the whole message. And in an office environment, that works really well. As people are working from home, we've had to get creative about how to drive some of those conversations when people are in remote locations.
One of the things that we're also seeing is the involvement of procurement. Mm-hmm. So again, we do a lot in the marketing procurement space. We have a software and buying service solution for companies that buy a significant amount and spend a lot of money on print. And so we're often working with and talking to marketing procurement. And we're seeing procurement becoming more involved in the marketing buying process, where a chief marketing officer, a head of marketing, a director 10 years ago, it would just, they're doing their own thing. But now you have some collaboration and they're working with procurement and sourcing teams, which have different processes and different set of evaluation systems when they're spending money.
I would echo that. We see the same thing, yeah.
So John, part 3 of the report is really what I call a real up close, indirect look at direct mail, right? So what surprised you most about this section of the report, and what do you think is the most important takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a pared down portion of what we could have built out for this particular session. Like we really turned this data inside and out and looked at it from all angles. So I'll flip on my screen and kind of breeze through a few of the key highlights again. But really, first of all, we looked at the different types of direct mail that were in use, right? And I think, who knows, maybe a catalog might be something we'd want to look to include in a future study, but really just kind of adoption rates, obviously postcards kind of as expected, just being the most accessible, least expensive format. Were kind of topped the shelf. But when we started looking at some of these relationships in the data, first of all, dimensional mail was the best format for representing the brand well. So that was led to a bunch of other insights, but in particular, I think that because of the better results that we see later on in the study with those who are able to really personalize their direct mail pieces, the branding being a huge piece of that puzzle. For those who aren't really experimenting with dimensional mail quite yet, certainly something that you might want to look into. So the other thing too that I think is important, and we've talked a little bit about data, but just integration of different systems, which is just so critical. Direct mail has come a long way, and it's no longer just, stick something in the mail and send it. There's lots of integration between different technologies that can happen. And those integrations paired with the data and branding is what's leading to better results. So it's nice to be, these are things going into this research study that we, suspected and hypothesized about. But then when the data came back from the research study and it validated our findings, that's when the light bulb really went off. So hopefully we'll be able to share a copy of this report so everyone can go through it on their own time. But the other one that really jumped out at me was the budgets. Okay, so when you start thinking about just how the world has changed and, spending has been shifted because of the pandemic. And like we've said, people are not spending as much on trade shows. But when we did a different survey last year, just right after, I think it was probably in March or something of last year, we wanted to understand how marketers were dealing with the pandemic and what they were going to do with all that trade show budget. A lot of them said that they were shifting to digital channels. But this study actually indicated to us that there's also quite a bit of spend that's going into direct mail. At the very least, the direct mail spend was staying the same. When we looked at those who are actually increasing their budget for direct mail, we saw that those are the folks who are seeing better campaign performance, more integrated technology, more personalized pieces going out, just better and more effective at reaching their target audiences. And probably because they were able to justify the increase in spend, they were the ones who were seeing good or very good returns on their investments. So this section there's a lot of data in it, but I think that the key takeaways, if you are going to be allocating budget towards direct mail, then you're going to want to make sure that you've got the systems integrated, that you're doing it right. Really, you're sending personalized pieces, and that you're able to measure. I think that's going to help justify spend for next year and the following years. And the best way to do that is to do it within a contained environment. It's not just a siloed channel. It's part of more of an omni-channel mix. Oh, might be muted.
There we go. You mentioned dimensional direct mail. What is that? Not everyone knows what that means.
Yeah, that was new to me, actually. And since Nick and his team kind of shared exactly what that is, we've been just playing around with dimensional. But I mean, Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of just define it as being more of a three-dimensional mailer, right? In our account-based marketing approach, we've been sending out books. I don't know if you've ever read Hacking Marketing by Scott Brinker, but it's a fantastic book just about, being agile within your marketing operations. And so because we're targeting the C-suite ourselves, and a lot of the knowledge from that book, we really truly believe in, and that's how we run our team. We decided to send that out. And so for me, it's a three-dimensional mailer, right? Something that's physical that you can hold on to, that's not just flat. But Nick, am I wrong with that definition?
No, that's pretty good. Yeah, you can see me looking around because you might suspect I've got something around here. So
there you go.
We call this whole spectrum tactile marketing, and our product is tactile marketing automation. So we bring the ability to have direct or dimensional, three-dimensional mail into your digital cadences, so we can use digital intent signals to inform content and timing of the piece. So this is actually a great example. I didn't have this planned. Otherwise it would have been right on my desk. Instead I had to walk over here. But this is an example, so you open it up and this is all a card that has sales reps and a picture of the prospect, but it's all informed right out of our CRM, printed on demand whenever the trigger is set. And this is a little manatee kit. So we send some prospects tea and then a little manatee that they can brew it with. But this is a great example of dimensional mail. But I think, to Sarah's earlier point, when you think about what it is that you're trying to sell, or maybe the value of a sale or a prospect, whatever kind of business metric you're trying to drive, you can take that information, you can take the data that you have about your prospect, pull this into your system of record, and then really inform kind of what piece gets created. That allows businesses to grow, kind of scale that growth. A lot of that integration, I think, allows scalability, which is going to be a key point, I think, in future years, as people begin to really kind of understand how effective some of these campaigns can be. The integration piece, I think, is, I'd say relatively new. I mean, the MarTech space, and this is outside of PFL, but the ability to kind of track and orchestrate is increasing every single day, which we of course are very happy to see. But measuring, even at the representative level, like who is having the most success and what type of, even some of that unstructured data about personalization of the messaging and what type of copy is included on that personalized card inside, we can measure all of that now. And I think this is just opening up, new horizons for people that are trying to integrate these efforts into their omnichannel campaigns.
John, you mentioned Scott Brinker. So he's somebody, I haven't read his book, but I follow him. He does a lot in the marketing procurement space, and he produces this slide or this chart every year. And it talks about the evolution of what we call MarTech, which is marketing technology, right? So you look at 10 years ago and there was something like 150 MarTech solutions. In 2019, I don't actually have the data from last year yet, there was over 7,040 MarTech systems. So Nick, to your point, so many companies, we're in the MarTech space as well because we offer a sourcing tool for print. There's so many companies that have solutions now that companies can leverage to better track the data, right, and have everything integrated. It's much easier to do now than it was several years ago. Absolutely. The other note, John, that I thought you said was interesting is when trade shows stopped, right? What are companies doing with their money? And one of the things we've seen some clients do is integrate print with their virtual events. So two cool examples is we had an organization that sent everyone who registered for the event a box 2 days before the event. And it had things in the box that they were to use during the virtual event. So it was a writing utensil, a cool notebook, and then like a cool martini set or a drink set. So there's happy hour, right, at the virtual conference. So in this kit, they have this drink set that they can then make their drink and use during the live event. The other thing we've seen people do is actually send things after the event. So instead of sending something a day or two before, they actually will send it to everyone who actually attended. The benefit to that is a lot of people register really last minute, right? So if I'm signing up an hour before the event, I'm not going to have that kit. But if I'm sending it to people after the event, then I'm making sure that I'm hitting everybody who attended. So I'm curious to see if we're going to continue to see that trend this year with companies using print to target and market the attendees at the virtual events. But I think it's a clever idea because I know I would be more engaged and more likely to attend if I got something in the mail from somebody.
I think we will see more, and I'll tell you why. Because we partnered with B2B SMX for their virtual event in October, I think it was. And as part of the kit, it was similar size as what I just showed you, but we also had like this multi-fold scratch-off card. So we added a little bit of gamification to their event schedule. And for every session that you attended, you could scratch off, you could get a code, and then if you complete the whole thing, then you can win prizes at the end. What they saw was 70% attendance by all registered event attendees. 70% of them attended all the way through the multi-day virtual event. So one of the things that companies are seeing that aren't getting that type of engagement is there's a lot of drop off after day one, because we're all on Zoom all day long. But what we found with that example was that that was far higher than we expected to see complete attendance of that. And so we've partnered with them again this spring. So we'll be doing that again. I think you're going to see more and more people do that.
Yeah, and I think the gamification is an important point, as well as QR codes and people using augmented reality to really engage people with print. So I think we're going to see more virtual events stay even after people can meet in person. And I think that companies should really think about incorporating print in some way. So John, we've gone through the 4 different sections of the report. We have about 7 minutes left, and I want to make sure we cover the 5 action items. So we have all this data and information. What can marketers do? What are their takeaways on how they can actually take action and implement some of these things into their marketing plans this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we're striving to do, is to provide some pragmatic advice to everyone listening in today. So it definitely makes sense to spend some time on the action plan. I think a lot of the things we've touched on in some way, shape, or form, but I might as well flip on my screen here again just to walk through this. It's probably the most effective way of seeing it. So being an analyst firm, we always like to start with an audit. It doesn't have to be, a deep dive, but we just want people to be aware of the channels that they're using. And sometimes, you just let things sit there on autopilot for way too long, and you're not really paying attention to the metrics behind some of the different channels that you're using. So you want to just take a little bit of a deeper dive into some surface level metrics at the very least to wrap your mind around which channels are helping you get results. So that's really the first step. And I think in all the, a lot of the marketers I talk to, the scariest thing is going into a system and looking at the results of any given campaign. It's like, who knows what you're going to find? And ignorance can be bliss. But if you really want to improve your results, it's a critical first step. Once you do that, then you want to make sure you're using the right mix of channels. And like I said earlier, 4 to 6 was really the sweet spot in terms of the number of channels in use. But there isn't just a blanket statement that that's going to work for everyone. You've got to consider your business, who you're going out after, and really figure out which mix of channels is right for you. So obviously, we think that direct mail should be part of this mix. I think the data definitely points us in that direction, just based off of the results, the effectiveness, the returns that we're seeing from our study participants. So those who aren't currently using direct mail should consider doing it, even if it's just, as an experiment to start, maybe picking one segment and just testing the waters and really being diligent about measurement. But that is critical, and it's because it's, a channel that seems to be performing very well, especially for the C-suite.
I really like, just to cut in.
Go ahead there, Nick. Yeah.
On step 3, you've got this comment about being a force multiplier. And I think that's a huge takeaway for us that we've leaned on, ever since we did this report. And we find that to be true again and again.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Nick, because I don't think we really covered this, but when we found that when direct mail was part of the mix, those folks were getting better results. So that's the force multiplier that you're referencing there, and certainly a big part of the reason why we feel like direct mail should be part of that mix. The other thing is, just making sure your tech stack is well integrated. Sarah, great point about Scott Brinker's infographic. I first started working with Scott when he was over at Ion Interactive. So that was a long, long time ago. And I remember the very first version of that infographic to where it is today. And it's one of those things, it's so easy to get started on new channels using different technologies. But to do it well, you have to make sure that those systems are talking together. And I think, that's to Nick's point about tactile marketing automation and being able to integrate direct mail into a digital technology stack. That's mind-blowing for a lot of people, but it's entirely possible and in fact very accessible as well. So making sure that the tech stack is actually talking to each other, that's a key success factor. And then back to data, that's to everyone's point here today, such a critical component for being able to personalize effectively. And so that kind of the 5 steps. I don't know if Nick, there's anything you wanted to kind of add into these at all, but these are kind of the first steps in the action plan.
The only thing I would say is kind of where we started in the intro. I've leaned on that advice that I got from a friend early in my career. Test, replicate it, test it again, replicate it again. We are in many ways the leader in this space, like integrating direct mail into digital campaigns. And we're running through these same steps all day long, every day, so these, I think, really are core to building a successful strategy.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I'll just add to that, because it goes back to hacking marketing. It's taking that iterative, more agile approach and testing, changing, and constantly improving. It goes back to having the data and being able to have that visibility into what is working and what isn't. And so, yeah, that's where those integrations come into play.
It makes me laugh because my girlfriend runs a company in the UK, and her tagline is the fixer of dirty data. And she always talks about how now more than ever, companies are really trying to clean up and get their data in order, which I think is really important for the print piece of it. When you're going to be doing your customization, you got to have the good data to back it up.
I like that. The fixer of dirty data. That's funny. We've all got it.
So. All right. Well, we are at time. I want to give a big thank you to John and Nick for not only producing this report, but being so generous to share it with the public. And I really appreciate that. I know I've already had some people request it from me. I talked about it on Clubhouse today, so I'll be sharing it with my community there. And just wanted to have each of you give a closing thought or key takeaway that you want people to think about as they're working on their omni-channel strategies for this year.
Nick, do you want to go first?
Sure. We are in a shifting environment. Everything's changing. I've even had this conversation with my kids recently. You know, they're just talking about disconnects that they see between kind of traditional kind of learning models at school and now trying to learn remotely. And we're all in that same boat. So my advice to my team recently was let's be cautious of experts. Everything's really new, you know, but let's test wisely. Let's make sure we're measuring, and then let's make sure we're not kind of caught in our own echo chamber, which, you know, to my earlier comment, we're absolutely going to be doing this report again because we want to see what other people are learning. You know, so one of the ways we learn is by teaching, but also just listening to kind of what others are bringing back to us. And that would be my advice to anybody trying to navigate this today.
All right. Thanks, Nick. And John, you?
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I mean, my key takeaway is pretty simple. I think as marketers, it's on us to just really focus on delivering an exceptional experience to our customers, to our prospects, to everyone that we engage with. And you know, not losing sight of that as new digital channels pop up or just other ways that, you know, you want to experiment come up, but just really focusing on optimizing a core set of channels to get the best results. I think that, you know, as this year goes on and hopefully we say goodbye to the pandemic, things are going to shift in the marketing landscape, and we're going to find new ways to engage successfully with the people that we need to. So just taking that experimental approach, if there's something you haven't tried, just give it a shot. Make sure you've got your arms wrapped around the results, and then kind of placing your bets when you know what works. So, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate, you know, spending some time with you and meeting you today, Sarah. So thanks for the opportunity to share the study with everyone.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. Enjoy your afternoons, and print is not dead.